Welcome to On the Brink, a fresh lens to take you and your business to new heights. Hi, I'm Andi Simon. I'm your host and your guide. And as you know, my great audience out there, my job is to help you get off the brink. I want you to see, feel, and think in new ways so you can change. And you know that change is painful, but in these fast changing times, there aren't many choices. But it's important for you to have a better understanding of things so you can do it wisely, quickly, be agile. Fast is the new now. So how are you going to be faster and better at what you're doing? I have with me today a fantastic individual who I met through a Vistage group that I did. His name is Patrick Van Gorder. He's Executive Vice President of the Level Agency. And I want you to know that I did a podcast for them and I enjoyed it so much I invited him back here so we could continue the conversation. Let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about by introducing Patrick's bio. Patrick Van Gorder has been part of a leadership team at Level Agency since the company's founding in 2010, which seems like yesterday, but it's not. It's like a moment ago. He's made immeasurable, significant contributions in each role he's had as Director of Campaigns and Platforms, as the AVP of Client Services, and now he's Executive Vice President. But his real desire for today is to share with you the changing nature of communication, marketing, and brand building for you, your company, and for things that matter to you. You have to understand what's going on because the world has turned digital. If you haven't noticed, I have a hunch you have. I bet the first thing you do when you want something is to Google it. And so it's very interesting. He'll tell you some major statistics, but today we're going to talk about how people buy and what the buyer's journey is like and why digital marketing has become so essential to your skill set, your way of viewing the world, and what Patrick can help you with. Patrick, thank you for joining me.
Hey, Andi, thank you so much for having me back. I'm excited to continue the conversation.
Before we get into it, though, tell the readers a little bit more, our audience, a little more about who is Patrick, about your journey, and about why this has become so important for you.
Yeah, thanks, Andi. So I am sitting here in sunny Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, home of Mr. Rogers, amongst other great Pittsburghers. I am a journalism and political science graduate that got into advertising accidentally. I graduated in 2009 into the midst of the Great Recession. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I got a call from a colleague who was writing a website that was focused on comparison shopping for higher education, and I said, it sounds like he's paying on net 30 terms. So let's go over there and let's do some work together. And I've never looked back. I've been with Level Agency, which is that firm ever since. So 2010 till my partner and I, Patrick Patterson, purchased the company from the former owner in March of 2021. So it's been a long, exciting and knowledge learning filled journey for me. We're up to about 75 people now, most of which are still in Pittsburgh, but we've got staff and clients all across the country. And our focus is helping businesses both learn about what their audiences are asking for and how to better sell their products, better position their products digitally, and also ultimately to help them sell. Right. Ultimately, it's still true that the main function of marketing is sales or direct ROI. But the exciting thing, the thing that gets me out of bed every morning, Andi, is the reality that not only can we generate revenue, can we sell, we can actually learn a great deal about where our customers are going, what they're looking for, and become even more efficient and more effective tomorrow because of the advertising we're doing today.
Let's talk a little bit about it because we know that the buyer's journey has changed. And in the old world, which wasn't that old ago, we used to buy lots of advertising, very flat, push it out. And as people will say, oh, really? But that's sort of a past way of communicating. And branding and marketing is about storytelling. People buy your story. as much as they buy the product or the package. And it really matters how you communicate that and how you make it accessible to them. So let's talk about in the world that you're in, where has all the dollars gone to, and what's absolutely important for a listener to understand that they should be doing as well. A little bit more about, let's set a context for why this is so important.
Absolutely. So 65% of total advertising in 2021 was online, was digital advertising, which is an incredible stat by itself. But when you factor in the fact that it's up from about 50% just a couple of years before 2019, that's, it not only is it the lion's share of the pie, but it's also the fastest growing segment of the pie. And the really interesting thing about that, that concentration of dollars in digital channels is 90% of that 65%. So 90% of that digital spend goes to one of three companies right now, right? It goes either to Alphabet, parent company of Google, YouTube, other properties like that. It goes to Meta, parent company of Facebook and Instagram, or it goes to Amazon. So what that means for your listeners is, yes, there is an incredibly complex ecosystem out there, and there are dozens, hundreds, thousands of different, platforms, different ad tech intermediaries, different tools out there. But really, if you focus on the vital few, the 90% that make up the lion's share, you can do quite a bit. You can get quite a bit of leverage out of your spend. And you mentioned something, just one other note on, Andy, you mentioned something that I think is really interesting, and I've been thinking a lot about. So if you think about sort of the ways that we've thought about advertising in the past, if you've ever taken an advertising class, or you're someone that has some experience talking about advertising, you've probably heard of the funnel, right? The advertising funnel, where you have at the very top, you've got awareness, and down at the bottom, you've got direct response, and things like that. And the reality is that comes from a moment when, if you think about like what a television ad was, there was literally no other action you could take. You just had to watch the ad, and maybe there was a phone number at the bottom that said, hey, call this number right now. There was no way to take action. There was no way to continue the conversation. Think about a billboard, right? There's very, very little that you can do other than see and register what a billboard says. The reality in the digital space is all of these channels are working together and allowing you to build your brand and build engagement with your brand in so many different ways all at once, right? So a Facebook ad is building brand awareness, but it's also driving engagement. It's also, maybe asking someone to fill out a form or buy a product. So it's sort of operating at all of the steps of this classic funnel at the same time.
Well, don't leave that thought, because now, as you're thinking about communicating your story or your message or what you'd like to see happen, it isn't, bring enormous top of mind awareness out there. It's figuring out ways to take the person who's ready to learn more and move them through that wonderful journey till they're ready to purchase, taste, try. And so your whole process has been transformed into much more immediate. And I was at a group, and one of the gentlemen said, people call us and they want to talk to somebody immediately. They want to listen to a doctor immediately. And that it's almost instant. It isn't instant gratification. They say, I only have time. This is my time. I want to do a purchase right now. Connect me. And
That's right.
I don't want to learn more. It's not slow. So how are you doing this with your clients? Some illustrative stories, or, case studies, or the frustration they're having?
It's a great question. I'll use one of our clients that's in the sales enablement SaaS world. They had a experience that was very much sort of the old school approach to what you ask people to do online, which was, hey, fill out a form and we'll contact you. Right.
Why does it seem so ancient?
Right. It does. But it should, because the way that the consumer perception has changed is they've said, no, I will contact you when I want to talk. If you think that I'm going to subject myself to another telesales funnel or another set of emails, you must be out of your mind. So I will contact you when I want to talk to sales. But in the meantime, what you can give me now is value. You can give me insight, something like a webinar or a white paper or a case study. You can help me know more about this space, learn more about your perspective and your thought leadership in this space. And then, by the way, when I'm ready to talk, yes, there's a form there. I'll get in touch right away, and I'll expect to be contacted pretty quickly.
Yes.
But the reality is, it's less about just being there. You have to be there with value. You have to be there with something that the consumer cares about, not just, hey, give us your information and we'll call you when we feel like it.
One of the things that illustrates, though, is that you really aren't selling a thing, a product, or your SaaS story. You're selling a relationship. And people are really buying knowledge and wisdom and experience and a much bigger product than the product they're actually going to end up buying. And I've been reading a great deal about how the world is shifting from B2C or B2B to B4C and B4B, as if we are going to collaborate around something that you need and I can help you with. And it's becoming very interesting to watch that mindset change, because as you're thinking about these clients, the customer for them wants you to work with them on making the right decision, not simply purchase what I've got here or be sold by somebody. So it's a real different buyer that you're dealing with, and they're often younger and sometimes not, but they also have different expectations on speed and ease and all kinds of things. Is that what you're seeing also?
It is. I know in our own world, at the level agency, as a services business, we really lean in on sort of the consultative partnership approach. And I think we've seen a lot of very successful organizations take that same approach, where it's not about the features, it's about the benefits. It's not about the services, it's about the solutions. And that's not to say that it needs to be woo, completely impenetrable to understand, what services and products a company actually does offer. You want to make it simple, simple enough so that you can accommodate different types of searchers, right? You might have someone that is coming to your site or coming to your physical office, and they know exactly what they want, and they want a partner, or they want a general contractor style vendor, right? That's going to take the blueprints from the architect and build the thing exactly as they see it.
That's a great analogy.
But I think in many cases, what they're really looking for is the architect and the general contractor, right? They're saying, hey, I have this goal, I have this business objective, and we're coming to you to help us solve for all of the problems that are, that we're dealing with in trying to achieve this objective. And you tell us how we can best, use this set of tools that are available to us to achieve this business objective.
Well, for us, we're corporate anthropologists. We specialize in helping companies change. You and I talked about blue ocean strategy and why that's such a great way to help companies find creating markets as opposed to competing in them. But I must say, to your point, and it doesn't much matter if it's culture change or strategy change, people come with a problem or a pain point and a challenge. And I always find the conversations are very interesting. We have a new client coming on now, and I must tell you that the way they came to us is different than the way we're going to serve them, and what they really needed is different than what they thought they needed, and that's just people. And I guess in some ways, the packaging of what you do in solutions is going to require some trust that there is the right solution for the problem that they've identified. How does data and data analytics fit into this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the curiosity that you're describing is probably the single most important attribute that I find in people in the knowledge economy in 2022, right? That little piece in the back of your brain that's saying, hey, what's going on here? How do I understand this data or this perspective or this product in a new and interesting way? What we find is that there is so much data that is accessible to you if you have the willingness and the knowledge of where to look, right? So if we think about, like, maybe it would be helpful to think about it in the context of a case study, right? So we have a new client that we're onboarding, and we're seeking to understand where their audience is, and they've got some perspective on who they'd like to speak to and where they think that those people spend their time digitally. So one of the data gathering exercises that we do is we have a deep interview conversation, kind of the classic marketing, like tell us everything that you know about where who your audience is, and where they live. But in the past, I think that was kind of the end of the line, right? Like, you have that conversation, you build your audience profile, and that becomes the audience profile that you use for a lot of your targeting efforts. What we do is we say, okay, so now we've gathered this perspective from you. Let's dig into the data that you have available and validate that, right? Mm-hmm. So what first party data do you have available? Do you have a CRM? When was the last time that you really explored the contents of that CRM, that you went in there?
Forgive me for laughing. Please continue.
It sounds like I'm hitting on I'm reading your mail a little bit here, Andi. Maybe is this an experience that you've had with clients as well?
Of course, but keep going, because the illusion of their reality is so interesting. But in fact, it's an illusion. And as you dig into their CRM, and when did you look at it again, I want you to finish your thought. I didn't want to interrupt you.
For sure. So you look at the CRM, look at the audience that's in there, then look at the analytics platforms that the client has. So look at Google Analytics. What can you learn about the audience, about the behavior once they come to the site, about how they get to the site? Take sort of that curious deep dive into information that maybe you've looked at before and maybe you haven't. And the great thing about these tools is there is so much. You don't need a developer, you don't need an IT person to be able to understand these things. You just need to be able to watch 3-minute YouTube videos at a time to say, hey, how do I see behavior funnels in Google Analytics, or how do I see the firmographic profiles in Salesforce, or whatever those questions are. It's all there if you're willing to dig in and take a look. And then once you get into this, so you look at the CRM, you look at the Google Analytics data, you look if there are ad platforms that are currently running. So we would look at Google Ads, at Meta, at LinkedIn or Bing or Instagram or wherever these folks are running ads. And then there's a whole new ecosystem of audience information that you can glean from those platforms. And then that's not even getting into the third-party tools that are out there that allow you to take sort of an outside-in perspective. But you kind of have to follow the thread.
Once you do, how does that influence what you do for whom? And how does it influence the kind of communication, call it advertising, that we create in order to capture those people closer to their point of purchase or somewhere along that buyer's journey? Some insights you can share.
Yeah. So what it does is it arms you with a good data supported ability to create a hypothesis. Right. And basically to say, I think that this audience of mid-market C-level people really care about the content that we have about cybersecurity, or the content that we have about additive manufacturing, or whatever, whatever that content segment is. And I think that because I can see that, those pages rank highly on the website, I can see that that's, that those are roles that are associated with those people, whatever whatever sort of the data story is that supports that. And then with that information, you can formulate and enunciate a hypothesis for what you're trying to do. So it could be something like, okay, my hypothesis is that if I show this cybersecurity content, if I feature this content to this audience for the next 2 months, I can dramatically expand my share of leads that are coming from this program.
Mm-hmm.
So you write that down, you write that hypothesis down, and you execute against it, and then you measure the results, and you compare what you thought would happen versus what actually happened, and they're very seldom exactly the same thing. But you then sort of learn, what did I learn from this experiment? And then how do I further exploit or further take advantage of the lesson that I've learned from this experiment? And if you treat your marketing like these micro hypotheses test sprints, instead of just, instead of just the cost center where, we're just over here, we're spending and advertising because that's what we do, you'll be astounded by how much you can learn, and how much knowledge and value and insight value that will bring to your enterprise.
Do you find it at times immobilizes your clients? Because I often find that the brain is wonderful at what it knows. It's familiar, it's really comfortable. The habits are there. I called it the illusion because your mind has a story, and that's what you believe to be true. There is no truth. The only truth is there's no truth. But that leads to that testing mindset, the curiosity quotient, the individual's willingness to learn by doing and keep learning from there. Are you transforming your clients to becoming learners that way? Because I find that it requires, they come in all knowing and leave full of curiosity. And that's fine. I'll take that. Because unless you're full of curiosity, you can't get unstuck. You don't know how to grow. You're certain, but it's not working. It's only so much we can fix until you open your mind to the possibilities. Do you find that the clients get transformed as well? Because I'm getting transformed as I listen to you.
Yeah, no, they do. They certainly do. It's actually, it can be pretty inspiring to watch, because and we're lucky to have an incredible set of clients. I'm sure you have the same. You have the privilege of being pretty selective with who you work with. So we start with a really high bar for the types of partners that we work with, but over time, I think we demonstrate to them a couple of things that grow their own capability in this space. First, we are fanatical about sort of trust-driving communication, meaning if something isn't working, you're going to hear about it from us first, rather than have to decipher it and figure it out yourself, right? Like, we're very, very careful in our culture to make that sort of a norm and an expectation. And then we sort of, in the context of our working, our weekly or biweekly or monthly coordinations, we really try to model the what if type thinking, and so that we have a tool that that's our hypothesis. It's like a database where all of our team members sort of log their hypothesis, just like the one that I shared with you as an example. Define what the success criteria are. And that's often a collaborative process with the client, where the client says, hey, I've been noticing the folks that I've been talking to at conferences are now much more interested in X. What would it look like for us to do some advertising against that segment? And we collaboratively develop that campaign, and we learn from it, right? We run the test and we learn from it. And instead of oh, well, it happens. And if it doesn't work as well as we hoped, we kind of just move on. We don't really talk about it. We probably spend more time talking about what we learn when it doesn't perform as we expect it to, than we talk about the thing that goes exactly as planned. So I think over time we build sort of that trust and that relationship where we become a curiosity engine, an extension of sort of the if you think about what marketing is, right, it's the interface between the public, right, and the business. It's where most of your first interactions with prospective non-current clients are. And that's such a privileged position to be in.
Yes.
But I think we often forget that so much of the privilege there is in the knowledge, not just in the opportunity to make a first impression or make a sale. It's also about what we can learn.
Because we're coming out of the pandemic, assuming we're coming out of it. Did you notice dramatic or important changes during that period that listeners should be paying attention to? My hunch is that your curiosity opened up a whole lot of interesting learnings. Are there any that you can share?
Yes. So we saw a decade of change, in a couple of years in terms of acceleration. And what that meant in practical terms is that trend towards digital advertising accelerated. The trend from platforms like linear television to streaming, to OTT, to connected TV, those trends accelerated. People spent more time online than ever before, and it was for a while we were the only game in town when it came to marketing. As we open up, and I share your optimism that hopefully the change is here to stay. But as we open up, there is a reality that there's a hunger for personal connection. There's a hunger for some of the things that brands have foregone, travel and face-to-face sales and things like that. But the genie is not going back in the bottle as it relates to the collaborative collaboration at a distance. And I think marketing at its best in 2022 is collaboration at a distance, right? It's this world where we're having real discussions and dialogues with people, even though we're not face to face or on the same meeting together. So I think to answer your question directly, Andy, the bottom line is the space accelerated dramatically, the trends accelerated dramatically, and the brands that have not yet sort of shifted. If your budget looks anything like 65% of your spend is not in digital, that probably means that you're behind the optimal budget allocation.
It's interesting. Some of our podcasts, Lisa McLeod had a great podcast on purpose-driven selling. But in some ways, it's not that different than purpose-driven marketing. And the people who have a purpose sold better than those who didn't. And in your digital marketing, in a sense, you need to have a good, clear purpose. What is it I'm trying to do, for whom and how, as opposed to I have a product and I want to sell it. And it becomes a bigger conversation in that process so that you get the right message to the right person when they're looking for you, as opposed to when you want to get it out there in sort of a vacuum, hoping it's the right time. And digital lets you do things that you can't do in person. You don't show up at 2 a.m. when somebody's searching for something because they can't sleep at night, right? It's it is just an interesting time. As I look at our clock and we're about ready to wrap up, my head is full of things I don't want the listener to forget, but I bet yours is as well, Patrick. Some things that you want to leave them with.
Yeah, I think I really like the model that you just constructed, Andy, of the marketing as sort of the opportunity to have a discussion with someone at 2 a.m. when they're, when on their timeline and on their schedule. What I would say is one thing that I think is an important thing for brands to understand is there are not, in the majority of cases, it's not just one interaction at 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. or whenever. It's a series of exposures. It's a series of conversations that allow brands to sort of unfold that value proposition and that purpose to their their prospective clients over time. So there's not a single, in most cases, there's as tempting as it is to point to a single moment of truth, what Google calls the zero moment of truth, the ZMOT. The reality is, that there are all of these influencing factors that sort of happen before that moment of truth, that are critical to the journey. So, what I encourage brands to think about is, what is that sort of what are some of those optimal customer journeys, and how can you provide value and insight and knowledge to prospects at every step of that journey. The other thing that's big in our, that's a big conversational piece in our space right now is the conversation around privacy. Mm-hmm. There is a major trend towards less of a surveillance state online. There's parts of that are regulatory. You look at what's happened in Europe. You look at the California legislation. That is half of it, and the other half is being driven by platforms themselves. Apple has made a real play towards being an agent of privacy of their users, and you also have things like the third-party cookie that are being proactively devalued by Google now, in advance of a recognition that those things are not going to be viable in the future. So I think what that means is, there's a recognition that the promise of total accountability was always sort of a pipe dream, right? There were a lot of people that looked like me over the last 20 years that have sold, this promise of full attribution, or exactly the value that every dollar that you spend is bringing back. And the reality is that in this more fragmented privacy ecosystem, it's just clear that it's never going to be as clean and as neat as people want it to be. Because the reality is, hey, Andi, if somebody listens to both of our podcasts, right, the podcast that you did for us and the podcast that we're doing here, and then they reach out to you, or they go online and they buy a book, what percentage of that book purchase was driven by seeing On the Brink behind you now versus seeing On the Brink behind you in the earlier podcast? There's no right answer to that. So I think, be wary of companies that overpromise as it comes to trackability, but at the same time, there's so much that you can learn and that you can measure, and that you can, there are really viable attribution models that you can build, but you have to go into it with an understanding that this is representative rather than completely.
Yep. Well, there is no certainty, so I agree with you. Humans just keep searching for it. And I like the fact that we're searching for it, because maybe it'll make fewer mistakes in the process, but it's complicated. The buyer is complicated. There are different parts. And when they buy what they thought they bought isn't necessarily what you thought you were selling them, and how they use it. How many times have I got into the field with my clients and observed how customers were using their products inappropriately? Well, why is it inappropriate if they're using it? Well, that's not what it was supposed to be for. And I had one friend who had a software development company. He fired the managers, and he had to get the engineers closer to the customer, because the engineers were certain that the customer was stupid. And I was laughing. I said, the stupid customer syndrome, right? You built something brilliant and the customer just doesn't get it. But it's really a complicated world today because it's so complicated. The choices are so many.
Yep.
And everybody influences what comes up first on Amazon or in Google and what page you're on. You know, I work hard to do organic search. So I'm on the first page of Google for corporate anthropologist or culture change expert. I can make only the second page for blue ocean strategy expert. But, you know, all of our stuff is content designed to help you buy the right thing in the right way. And that's what you're doing too. If they want to reach you, Patrick, how can they do that best? We'll certainly have it on our podcast blog, but, you know, you can please share it for them.
Visit us at level.agency. So that's www.level.agency, or you can just type level.agency into your search bar. And there's a contact us option there. There's a lot of great content. Like I previewed earlier, you can check out our podcast at Test, Learn, Grow is the name of our podcast. You can get it wherever you get podcasts, and check out the episode that we did with Andi previously. It was a really, really good conversation.
Well, you know, Patrick and I share the same joy at helping people do things that are challenging for them. And our conversation was about blue ocean strategy, creating markets. This one is about how do you stop wondering how to sell or market your product and do it? Because the only way you will learn is to be curious, to test, make few assumptions, just a little. One assumption is I need Patrick to help me make the right decisions and test them all so I can see what's actually happening. But the world's going digital to a degree that you should be as well. And I don't care if you're a solopreneur or a small business or a growing entrepreneur or a mid-market client, like we have so many. It's people are going to buy you remotely. They're going to buy you online. They're going to buy you by what they see. I've actually had people download white papers and yellow mark them when I meet with them. I said, well, yeah, it's sort of like, you know, are you real? It comes through all that stuff. Patrick, has been such fun. We could talk for a long time. Thank you so much for today.
Good. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time, and I look forward to hearing what's next for Dr. Simon.
Oh, well, for Patrick and I, let me just wrap for my audience. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming. You have made us on the top 5% of podcasts globally, which I think is fantastic. Bring along friends. Send me your ideas, because Patrick came to me through something I did, and we show up a lot, and that's how we market ourselves. We show up a lot, and things come our way. On the Brink is here to help you see, feel, and think in new ways. Both of my books have won awards, so I'll promote them a little bit. On the Brink, a fresh lens to take your business to new heights is how a little anthropology can help your business grow. And Rethink, Smashing the Myths of Women in Business was just awarded the our second Bronze Best Book Award for 2022 from Axiom for Women in Business as a category. And I do think that this is a time to rethink. When you're on the brink, I like my titles, you too can begin to see things through a fresh lens. That's my job. How do I, as an anthropologist, help you step back, look at things, and begin to understand the changes that are happening? Because fast is going to be the new you, and you have to really be agile, adapt, and begin to make things happen for you. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Patrick Van Gorder, for being here. We'll post this and you guys can share it, and it's just a pleasure. Thanks again. Remember, reach me at info@andisimon.com, and I'll be here for you. Bye-bye now. Have a great day. Bye-bye.